Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. On Sunday, we're going to see one of the most star-studded and most anticipated Super Bowl halftime shows of all time. You're going to see Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, and Kendrick Lamar all playing their biggest hits for 12 minutes in front of a national television audience of over 100 million people, and in front of an in-person audience at SoFi Stadium of over 70,000 people. We've never seen a show like this before, and the amount of planning and coordination that is going into this, from the transitions in the songs to the special effects, to the choreography and the staging and the camera angles, is absolutely crazy. The show is set in stone, and has been for a while. So imagine that the day of the Super Bowl, Kendrick drops out. He can no longer perform at the game. And now with almost no time left before kickoff, the whole show is in jeopardy, and there's a mad scramble to figure out what to do. No, Kendrick is not dropping out, and no one in this show is actually dropping out. But as crazy as unrealistic as that scenario might seem, it actually happened before. At Super Bowl XXXII, one of the performers dropped out literally hours before kickoff, and the solution that the organizers came up with, considering the circumstances, was truly remarkable. This is the story behind one of the craziest halftime show moments in the history of the Super Bowl. Before I talk about the actual halftime show and the fiasco that happened, we need some context to understand what the original plan was, why the plan changed, and the possible options facing the show organizers. If we go back 1 year in time to 1997 at Super Bowl XXXI, the show was an absolute disaster. Aside from the fact that the show was not good and not well received, with the Blues Brothers just looking absolutely god-awful out there, this performance had the biggest tragedy in the history of the Super Bowl halftime show, when during practice, a bungee jumper fell and died. If you want to learn more about that and how that tragic death impacted not just the show, but the surrounding commercials, click the card in the upper right corner. The NFL knew that they needed to have a good show at Super Bowl XXXII after a lackluster one the year before. And with that, they knew just where to turn to. Radio City Music Hall had produced 3 halftime shows by this point, and all 3 were widely regarded as the 3 greatest halftime shows of all time. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. But if you ask most people prior to Super Bowl XXXII what the 3 best halftime shows were, they would tell you Chubby Checker at Super Bowl XXII performing with 88 grand pianos, Diana Ross at Super Bowl XXX where she performed her hits and left the stage in a helicopter, and Michael Jackson at Super Bowl XXVII, which needs absolutely no further explanation. Radio City was a pretty safe bet, and for the Super Bowl XXXII halftime show, they had the idea to honor the 40th anniversary of Motown Records. As for the original plan for the show, it was going to be a mix of the old and the new, honoring practically all eras of Motown music. You'd have the Temptations, who had 13 songs hit the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 in the 1960s and 1970s, and had arguably the most famous Motown song of all time, with My Girl. I think just about every person in America has heard that song at least once and knows the words. You'd have Queen Latifah, who was a few years removed from winning the Grammy for Best Rap Solo Performance. You'd have Martha Reeves, who headlined Martha and the Vandellas, a group that had 6 songs hit the top 10 and who recorded the original version of Dancing in the Street. You'd have Smokey Robinson, who was the lead singer in The Miracles, and then had a surprising number of big solo hits during the 1980s. You'd have Boyz II Men, maybe the biggest group in the world at the time, a group who just had one of their songs, 4 Seasons of Loneliness, hit number 1 a few months before the game, and a group that had some of the longest number 1 running songs of all time, including End of the Road, I'll Make Love to You, and One Sweet Day, a collaboration with Mariah Carey that spent a whopping 16 weeks at number 1. And then, you'd have the group that was the focus of our story, entering the 4 tops. It's impossible to talk about the history of Motown and the artists that shaped the company without talking about the 4 tops. There's a reason why they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and why even more than 60 years later, their music is still remembered and cherished by Americans all over the country. In their time with Motown, the group had 18 songs at the top 20 of the Billboard Hot 100, 7 songs at the top 10, and 2 songs at the top spot. Estimates say that the 4 tops have sold 50 million records in their career. If you were going to do a halftime show honoring the legacy of Motown, you had to include the 4 tops in there. The 4 tops, along with those aforementioned 5 artists, were going to perform at the Super Bowl XXXII halftime show in San Diego on January 25, 1998. And from all accounts, everything was going absolutely swimmingly. Every press release for the show that I could find from its announcement in early December of 1997 to a few days before the game had the 4 tops listed on the program. Smokey Robinson even said on the preparations for the performance and on hanging around the 4 tops, "We are already having fun here. Just all of us from Motown getting together." The group was attending all the festivities and events in San Diego, as were all the other Motown artists. But if you know the history of the halftime show, or you remember watching this show back in 1998, you're probably thinking to yourself, hey, wait a minute, I don't remember the Four Tops performing. And that's because, well, they didn't. They dropped out at the last minute. This is where the story has a bit of conflicting information, and I've dug high and low and couldn't get confirmation, but the basic premise regardless is the same. Theory 1 is that lead singer Levi Stubbs' brother, Joe Stubbs, was declining rapidly in health. Levi and Joe had a close relationship with each other, and Joe had done some work with the Four Tops in the past, singing with his brother on a few songs, and even composing the 1982 song Nobody's Gonna Love You Like I Do for the group. He passed away only a few days later on February 5th at the all-too-young age of 55 from heart problems. Theory 2 is that someone completely different died, and that what happened with Joe Stubbs was completely unrelated and just absolutely tragic that two people associated with the group passed away within a week of each other. I bring that up because the article on this incident mentioned a death in the family, and Joe hadn't died yet, and there was never a person specified with the death. Whatever the case was, due to family reasons, the Four Tops, at the very last minute, left San Diego and did not perform at the Super Bowl. And with only hours until kickoff, the halftime show organizers had their hands tied. Let's look at all the options that the organizers had at their disposal to fix this last-minute problem, because obviously, a halftime show takes months and months of work to put together, and there's not a whole lot you can do if one of the performers just drops out at the last minute. It's not like the national anthem, where if Garth Brooks threatens to not perform minutes before he's supposed to go up there, you can just spot Jon Bon Jovi in the stands and have him do it before busting into another performance of It's My Life. You can't drastically change a ton beforehand. There's way too many moving parts, especially when everything in the show is timed down to the second. Option 1 was to just scrap the segment involving the Four Tops entirely. Fortunately, the group was only set to perform one song, and they weren't doing it with anyone else, so it wasn't like a situation at the Super Bowl 50 halftime show with Bruno Mars and Beyonce, where you're doing something together with the other artists and need their cooperation. Theoretically, you could just cut the Four Tops song out and replace it with absolutely nothing. However, there are a few problems with that. Number 1, there weren't live instruments at this show. Everything was done and was timed to a track, so taking this out meant that you had to adjust the track and cut the show by a minute. It also meant more ad space to fill, or a longer halftime show segment with the NFL and NBC guys. Plus, the staging would be off. Let's say you have Song A, Song B, and Song C, and the dancers need to be in one spot for A, one spot for B, and one spot for C. You can choreograph the routine so that if C is far away from A, they can use B to get there. But if you cut the song, how are the people supposed to get to C in time if they don't have B as a buffer or a transition? Unless you're Usain Bolt, it is practically impossible. Plus, having the dancers learn an entirely new routine hours before the game seemed unrealistic, especially when you have that many people filling the field. Option 2 was to just place some video montage or something similar over whatever the Four Tops were going to be doing. Stitch together some video of some of the great Motown singers and their legacies and go from there. However, this completely destroys the pacing of the show. The show already started with a video montage, and an admittedly painful one of NBC personalities trying their best to sing some of the greatest hits of Motown. You want to put 2 video montages into the show in a 2-minute stretch? Good luck getting people to stay for that. It's the equivalent of a clip show episode, and no one likes clip show episodes. So even though this solution wouldn't have messed with the timing, it wouldn't have been ideal. Option 3 was to keep the same exact track, but just have lead vocals on whatever the Four Tops were going to be doing instead of an instrumental. It's not the worst idea in the world, as you saw halftime shows do this all the time. You didn't necessarily need live singers if you had choreographed dance routines. The only problem with that? I'd say 99% of the time, it looks terrible. There's a reason we don't have those as halftime shows anymore, and that's because you got nonsense like this. Yes, we're using Vanilla Ice's song from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to give Frosty the Snowman a new age feel. And NFL executives wondered why people actually switched to Fox for the halftime show that year. Basically, every option that the organizers had was not good and was not ideal. That was until they came up with option number 4. And this is a bold option that I'm calling Option We'll Do It Live. There was a 4th option that seemed almost unthinkable. What if one of the acts already in the halftime show does the song that the Four Tops were supposed to do instead? What if one of the acts learns a brand new song that was not theirs and that they were covering, learns how to perform it, learns all the choreography and the cues associated with it, and the show goes from there? Well, that's the option that, with minimal prep work, the organizing committee settled on. After the Temptations performed Get Ready, instead of the Four Tops coming on, the group would stay out for an additional song and cover the group's biggest and most iconic hit, I Can't Help Myself, also known as Sugar Pie Honey Bunch. Now on one hand, it's not like the Temptations were being asked to perform some obscure song. Everyone knew this one, especially if you were a Motown artist. The song was a #1 hit back in 1965, and is one of the most iconic and recognizable Motown songs of all time. There was no way that the Temptations didn't know what song this was or how it went. This was a standard. However, there's still backing harmonies and whatnot that you have to learn, and since you're not doing the full song, you still have to know which parts you're going to skip, so there is some learning involved in the process. Plus, the Temptations had never performed this song before. Setlist.fm has a list of every artist to perform the song live in concert. The Temptations never appeared on the list. I scoured high and low on YouTube for any performances whatsoever of the band covering the song. I found nothing. The only thing I could find was a medley that the group did with the Four Tops, where the Four Tops sang the song, but the Temptations sang something different over it. Basically, the Temptations were going to play this song for the very first time live at the Super Bowl on just hours of notice in front of a television audience of 90 million viewers and a peak television audience of over 133 million viewers. Absolutely no pressure. And the end result? Well, I'll let you be the judge of how it went. Yeah, it went surprisingly well. Like, really well. Remember, considering the circumstances, this was probably the first time they ever performed the song at Qualcomm Stadium. Some audience members were confused as to why the Four Tops weren't there, and why the Temptations were doing this song instead of one of their other hits, especially since the band didn't perform The Way You Do the Things You Do, or any of their other songs that would have been perfect for that stage. But for those in the loop, it made this performance all the more remarkable. On mere hours of notice, the Temptations came in, did the cover, and didn't miss a single beat. And while the halftime show received positive reviews, with negative reviews toward Boyz II Men singing a song for Mama to promote their new album, even though that song is painfully slow and it's no business being performed in a stadium at the halftime show, and with negative reviews toward Martha Reeves for, I kid you not, the worst vocal performance by a female artist in the history of the halftime show, and yes, I am aware that Fergie exists, many people regarded the Temptations as the high point. And for those wondering, even though the Four Tops would never get another opportunity to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show, they would get to do a pregame concert at Super Bowl 40 in Detroit, so they eventually found their way into the big game about a decade later than everyone expected. When people think of the crazy moments in the history of the halftime show, it's usually things on camera that were not supposed to happen, such as the infamous controversy at Super Bowl 38 involving Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson, and MIA flipping the bird at Super Bowl 46. But considering the circumstances, even though this happened off camera, this might be the craziest one of them all. To have a group drop out at the absolute last minute, and to have another group step in and learn a brand new song with only hours to spare, and to have them do it flawlessly to the point where no one suspects a thing? For the Temptations and the Super Bowl halftime organizers on this day in 1998, this truly was the definition of having sunshine on a cloudy day. Get your official Jaguar Gamer 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9, and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.